Hi everyone, my name is Heather. For my final project for this class, I chose to discuss the STS theme of observation stemming from methodology. Here I included a picture of Christopher Columbus looking at the globe in order to begin his journey to the New World because I thought that his contributions to science fit well with my chosen theme. Before we can dive into looking at the important figures of observation in our history, we must first be able to understand what exactly the term observation is. Here I have included my own definition about what the word means to me, and that is the action of examining something carefully in order to gain better knowledge and information about it. With that definition, we can begin to understand that a lot of what makes science is discovery. If we just looked at things from books and never went out and found new things for ourselves, we wouldn't be where we are today. And the Renaissance era influenced this standpoint. I will also discuss in detail each of these important figures that I believe contributed a lot to STS with their observations, and also this movie that plays an important role in understanding just how important observation is. We first start with Christopher Columbus, an Italian explorer and navigator who has been deemed the founder of the New World. The New World is also known as the Americas, which wasn't necessarily uninhabited, as there were already people native to its land that had their own communities and ways of life. While he and his crew may have impeded on the already inhabited land, this discovery of the New World changed our knowledge about the universe as a whole, and it also allowed us to create new theories and expand upon our religious beliefs. Columbus and his crew went exploring to find new economic and religious opportunities, but most importantly, wealth. He then went on to discover one of his first Caribbean islands, calling it Hispaniola. The left image depicts what the encounter may have looked like. We can refer back to his letter written to King Ferdinand of Spain in 1493, which discusses his observation of the initial voyage. He goes on to explain that he has found many islands and named them as well. But what I find important about this text is that he talks about his observations of the people he encountered and the new land as well. This letter of his provides crucial information that was used in order to understand our world a little better. And if it weren't for his voyage and passion to observe more of the world than just Europe, we probably wouldn't be here today. Next, we have one of the most influential figures in observation, Galileo, who was an Italian scientist in the fields of astronomy, philosophy, and mathematics. I specifically included him because he relied heavily upon scientific experimentation through observation, leading to his development of the scientific method that we know so well today. His role in astronomy was very important during the scientific revolution because he was able to share his discoveries with others, and this was truly groundbreaking. An important text of his that allows us to understand his observation was in his piece, The Sidereal Messenger, written in 1610. An important segment of this text is where he explains that he had successfully made his first observation with his newly invented telescope. He states, "After the moon, I frequently observed other heavenly bodies, both fixed stars and planets, with incredible delight." The reason that this specific observation is so important is because in his text, after he addresses his observations, he says that he is going to use those observations to find a way to measure the distances from each of the planets. This most definitely advanced the world of science, and he essentially kickstarted this idea that observation can lead us to even more discovery. I included this picture of Galileo because it gave me a great visual representation of his workspace and showed how he made his observations. Next up, we have Isaac Newton, another important figure of the scientific revolution whose observations contributed heavily to science, but especially mathematics. Newton was a man who wanted to expand upon math and has been known as the father of calculus. His decision to observe math in a new way by creating calculus allowed the explanations of the universe to be further supported now that math played a role in it. Since observation was so important to him, he is an important figure to think about during the Renaissance period when observation was the new and improved way of thinking. Here I included two images of Newton and the ways in which he had made his observations. On the right, we have him sitting under the tree where the infamous apple changed his whole perspective of motion. And the left, showing him observing light, which was associated with the concept of the color wheel. Now I would like to talk about women who greatly contributed to STS due to their observations. beginning with Ada Lovelace, the world's first computer programmer. A good friend of Charles Babbage, the inventor of the analytical engines, she believed that his computers could do more than just solve arithmetic problems and said, "It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform." Her observations of Babbage's computer allowed her to believe that if they learned to program the engine to do certain tasks, like play music for example, then it would do just that. Babbage himself hadn't been able to notice that what he created could do this, so I'm grateful for Lovelace's contribution. She wrote formal papers explaining her observations of the engine, and in the viewing, Who Was Ada Lovelace, the World's First Computer Nerd? It says that she was able to translate the paper about Babbage's work from French back to English and fully understand the concept of his engine by even taking it a step further, which just shows how intelligent she was. Without her perception of the computer, I wouldn't be able to share this PowerPoint with you about her. Another important female figure in scientific observation was Eartha Ayrton. This exceptional woman was responsible for new discoveries in the field of electricity, which were then applied to her work. Her observations included those of the ripples in water as well as in sand, and also the electric arc. Her book, The Electric Arc, summarized her observations of the ripple marks in water and sand and the famous electric arc. These images to the right show her sketches of what she had observed when experimenting with the electric arc and the ripples. Another point that I wanted to bring up about Eartha was the fact that she had a very difficult time as a female in her profession. Although she was nominated to be part of the Society of Engineering, she was denied due to her sex. One way that I look at her argument is that she didn't want people to observe her for being a woman, but to observe that she was a good scientist and that your sex should play no role in whether or not someone is good at science. She has made many contributions to our world just because of what she observed, and her discoveries are still applied in today's science. Nikola Tesla is one of the most world-renowned figures when it comes to inventions stemming from observations. He played a large role in ongoing development of electricity and how it allowed America to go into the Second Industrial Revolution. With his and also Thomas Edison's electrical observations, they were both able to make it so that Americans would be able to have power in their homes rather than just in the factories for the purpose of working longer hours. His early life consisted of constant observations of the world all around him, and it even allowed him to invent things at the age of 6. As described in Viewing American Experience, Tesla, his mother was an inventor herself, so Nikola got a lot of his inspiration from her. Despite having some personal issues with phobias and obsession, he still was able to successfully observe different elements and create things that are still used in our everyday lives. The images include those of him holding his cold light invention and also the aspects of electricity that he would observe normally. The viewing that I chose to include in my project is the film Hidden Figures, which is based on a true story that focused on 3 women who worked with NASA during the launch of John Glenn into space and provided their mathematical skill for many of the other operations that went on during this time. One woman who was very much highlighted in the viewing was Katherine Johnson, an American mathematician, specifically in orbital mechanics. As shown in the movie, she was able to provide extensive mathematical equations in order to provide coordinates for the astronauts' landings and other such formulas that kickstarted NASA's initial space flights. One observation to be noted that Katherine Johnson made was her creation of the one-star observation system that would allow astronauts to determine their location with accuracy. This was crucial for astronauts so that they had a sense of how to navigate around in space and be able to find their way home. I included some pictures of the 3 women on the right side. Katherine is just below it, hard at work, and on the left is John Glenn, the man that they helped be able to orbit around the Earth. This film is important because it shows the role that women played in STS during this time in our history. One important thing to remember about Europe interacting with the New World during the time of Columbus's voyage were the consequences that will forever be embedded into our history. These are things such as disease, war, and several changes that the natives of the Americas had to go through in order to adapt to what the colonizers had in store. There were demographic and economic consequences of the discovery of the New World that included these key elements. On the flip side, however, important things that were beneficial to the New World was a trade, not the slave trade per se, but trading things like sugar, tobacco, minerals, etc. Our society is still heavily influenced by European culture and will always be. Without the act of observing the natural world, we wouldn't be able to move forward in science and technology, and therefore our society would be constantly stuck in a repeated way of life. Each one of us observes things every day of our lives, whether it be subconsciously or consciously, and those observations that we have made have each provided us with knowledge about the world, our peers, and how we choose to live our lives. We can definitely thank all of these figures for stressing the idea of how important observing can be. After the viewing of my project, you might even ask yourself, where will observations lead us to in the future? Or, will I be able to make a contribution to STS based off of the observations that I have made? It's all based on our perspective of the world. Thank you for viewing.